Good morning guys, we're back at it again with another video. Today, special video, we're at a new location. Ooh, fancy, fancy. So we're at Factotum Farms, which means
Jack of all trades.
The jack of all trades, which is kind of like a handyman in a sense. Factotum Farms here, about an hour from where I live. And what we're gonna be doing today is we're gonna be going over how to build a wall out of dirt, otherwise known as rammed earth. So we've got our happy tampers, Mr. Jim, Mr. Green Dream Project. He's always out doing something. We've got Mr. Sombrero.
Robert.
We've got Jason, the owner of the property here. And what have you got going on? And Mr. Ray, I'm so sorry.
Coming up from behind the wall. What's up, everybody?
Right on. So what do you have going on out here, Mr.
So
Jason?
we have a lot of fun going on out here. As you can see, we're trying to just create a structure to protect the old Jalopy RV and cover it up and add a little bit more
kind of like living space. Make it a little bit nicer because you guys are going to be growing a lot of crops out here. So we're going to be, or him and Ray, they're going to be working on completely enclosing this in, as well as including some rammed earth wall sections, which is pretty badass. So we're going to go over that in today's video. We're going to take these forms off. We're going to build 2 more sections over here. We're going to be good for that. We're going to do it.
We're going to get it done.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, let's get started. So the first thing that we're working on here is removing all the formwork from the previous wall that they built the previous day. So when you're doing rammed earth, is you want to take the formwork off for it the following day. You don't want to come back a week later and try to take it off. You just might not get some good results. So you can see the rammed earth wall that they finished off yesterday and looking pretty nice, really cool that you can just use dirt to build a wall like this. So the first thing that we want to do when we have the formwork off is that we want to re-grease the formwork up. Now there's a lot of different solutions that you can use, but definitely one of the cheapest, probably most environmentally friendly ways is actually just using some vegetable oil, putting that on the plywood and any of the pieces that are going to be touching the dirt, and then just using a palette knife to spread it out nice and evenly across all the plywood. So next step is to reassemble the formwork that we just took off. So you can reuse all the same pieces. You can reuse that 3/4 inch plywood as much as you want, essentially to a point, until maybe there's just too many kind of like bends and curves in it, and it might be at a good point to replace them. But you can reuse them for a lot of this rammed earth formwork. So we're just getting them in place nice and loosely. We're just trying to get it to a point where we can put the whalers on, but we want to make sure that everything is nice and tight and buttoned up. The difference with doing something like rammed earth as opposed to just doing like straight concrete is that there's going to be a lot of outward pressure on the formwork as we're ramming the earth down. So this has to be really tight and really buttoned up. Now we're installing the whalers. So the whalers will help keep the formwork nice and straight going along the line here. So we're just using a combination of these pipe clamps, which you can get at Home Depot or Lowe's. And then these, we have 2x6 whalers on the bottom. And then in the mid section here, we have 2x10 whalers. The reason why we have 2x10 whalers in the middle is because that's where we're going to be standing when we're going to be tamping that earth down. And then in the center here, we always put down a concrete footer for the rammed earth to sit on. And then we're using some PVC pipe to go around the pipe clamps so that we're able to actually pull those pipe clamps out when there's dirt all around it. And depending on how you do your wall section, you don't have to have any pipe clamps in the middle here like this. All the pipe clamps can be on the outside of it. So Jason is just using soil on his property, which is really convenient to have your building material right on the property. So we're screening it here and trying to get out any of the big rocks, and we just want a nice fine dirt mixture. We don't want a lot of rocks in it because the rocks don't tamp very well, and when you see them in basically in the finished product, they can easily be picked out and fall out of it. So we just want to make sure that we are screening out and trying to pick out any of the bigger rocks and then that's going to give us a much more consistent mixture, and it's just going to be a much better end product. Having a tractor to do this work is definitely not necessary. It just really speeds up the process for, moving the dirt, screening it, mixing it up. But you can actually do all of this by hand, just with a shovel and maybe a cement mixer to do the mixing of the dirt. Especially for smaller projects, that's much more ideal than having big machinery like this. But you can see that we mix in some Portland cement in the dirt, and Jason is just going around and mixing it up with the front loader on the tractor, and just getting a nice, very consistent mixture. So again, on smaller projects, we'd probably just use a small cement mixer and just do smaller batches. But since we have the availability of the tractor, we can use it to basically get the soil mixed up. So the percentages are around 90% soil and 10% Portland cement. And for a soil type, that is an appropriate ratio for making this rammed earth. Now, next thing that we want to do is we want to wet the rammed earth to a point where you don't want it to be soggy or soupy, but you also don't want it to be dry. So it's hard to explain the exact consistency that you want, but you want to be able to form it in your hands and drop it, and it still retains some of its form. So you don't want it to drop down and go like boink. So when you mix it into a ball, you want it to kind of hold its shape, but also not be too soupy at the same time. So this is actually a very fast method of doing this. We're actually able to do this entire rammed earth wall section, including installing the forms and doing all this mixing and doing all the tamping in just about 4 hours time. It was really nice to work with all these guys today, and one reason why we're so fast and able to get this done so quickly is that pretty well everybody except one person, the Mr. Sombrero guy, had experience with doing rammed earth. So we all kind of knew the ins and the outs of it, and that made for definitely a much faster process of getting it done. And if you're looking for more details about how to do rammed earth, very specific instruction, very detailed instruction, then definitely check out the rammed earth basics course that Ray and I put together. So we go over basically from start to finish of how to do our rammed earth benches and our rammed earth fire pit by our yoga pavilion. And we go into excruciating detail about how to do this and get the best end results. And you get a beautiful fire pit and bench set at the end of it. And so you can see now the finished formwork with all the whalers, all the sister boards in the middle. So those sister boards in the middle are really important for such a long wall section to have those in there so that the entire thing stays very nice and secure and sturdy. And with doing the formwork, you might think, oh, let's just get it done, let's get it up, and let's start, throwing some dirt in there. But you really want to make sure that you take a lot of time, make sure it's very, very tight and very clean. And any gaps that you don't want in your wall, make sure you get those closed up. But yeah, it is an important process to set up that formwork properly first, and then getting it to a point where you can start mixing and tamping the dirt in there. So again, using the tractor is so much easier because we're used to actually hauling the dirt up in buckets. So having the tractor right there with all the rammed earth mixture, it was really, really handy. And right now we're just throwing in some of the dirt in the bottom there. And we want to make sure that all of our lifts, so all the dirt lifts that we do that we're going to be tamping down, are very consistent in terms of how much dirt that we're actually putting into it. So we had a small piece of rebar that we had a piece of tape on the end. And as we're putting the dirt in, we're also smoothing everything out so that it's going to be nice and flat. But we're using that piece of rebar with the tape on it just to make sure that the depth of the dirt is going to be consistent across the entire wall section. So you want to have, I would say, somewhere around 6 to 7 inches of dirt when it's uncompressed. So once you actually compress it down, it'll actually only be about 3 or 4 inches worth of dirt, worth of rammed earth. And this is something that you can test out on smaller wall sections, or you can make small forms and just kind of test out the compression and your soil mixture. But once we get that dirt in there, we want to lightly tamp it once, and then we're just using some standard 8-inch tampers. You want to tamp it once, and then you go back, and then you want to tamp hard 5 times in one place, move over, tamp 5 times hard in the next place, and then just keep doing that all along the wall section there. So we want to make sure that obviously the amount of dirt that we have is going to be consistent, but it's also really important to think about how we're compacting the dirt, and we want to make sure that the compaction of the dirt is consistent all across too, just so that the I mean, it can be nice to have some waves in the lifts in terms of how it looks. You want to make sure that it's pretty similar and pretty consistent all the way across. So this is probably just the hardest part here with all the tamping. Physically, it's the hardest part because we're just tamping. Jason's bringing over more dirt so we don't get much more of a break, and then we just keep tamping, and just ensuring that we're getting a nice consistent tamp all the way across using our 5 punches, going across to the next spot, 5 more punches, and then just doing that all the way across. So I think we had 4 tampers there, and that definitely made short work of this wall section. Jim's even adding in a little bit more water there, just so that because as the dirt's kind of sitting out in the sun, it's going to dry. So we're just adding a little bit more, but you can kind of see how the mixture is from the video. So it's not too wet, so it's kind of like wetted, but it's not dry. And that's the proper mixture that we want in order to get the best end result. And so then here's a final shot. There's a couple of different ways of finishing off the top. We use actually a combination of Portland cement and dirt. We just add a lot more Portland cement in. So instead of it being about 10% Portland cement, it's somewhere around 30 or 40% Portland cement. So you can just mix that up in a cement mixer and just pour that on top, and then that'll give you a nice cap that's going to protect the rammed earth. There's other ways of doing caps. I've seen, brick and mortar on a cap of a rammed earth wall section, but you do want to protect the top of it because it will start to erode away and flake away on you. So it's great to get out and work with Jason, Ray, Jim, and the boys. It was a lot of fun. We had a good time doing it because doing rammed earth by yourself like that, it would be very difficult. So it's nice to be able to get a bunch of people together so that you can work on it together. You're learning some new skills, building community, and I think it's awesome. And you're using something that is just coming straight from the ground as your primary building material. So there's going to be lots of other projects that I do on the property here that are going to be that I'm going to be using rammed earth. I've got a couple of ideas already swirling around in my head, and I'm excited to do those. But definitely check out the rammed earth basics course. Not only does it support my channel, but it also supports Ray, who essentially does natural building type work pretty well full time. So that's his day job, and get yourself some really good information. I think it's almost about 2 hours worth of material, and it's definitely one of the best resources for doing rammed earth yourself. And having that initial knowledge is really important so that you're going to get a beautiful end product. And if you're going to be spending a lot of time and effort, not necessarily a ton of money on it, but if you're going to be spending all that time and all that effort doing something like this, having that set of instructions initially will certainly help with the learning curve and give you a beautiful end product. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next video. Talk to you soon. Peace.